Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 5 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Canto 4 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 3. Section 2, Sati appeals to Shiva to let her go. Okay, so here we go. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Niravishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyas cha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Verse 10, my sisters, my mother's sisters and their husbands, and other affectionate relatives must be assembled there. So if I go, I shall be able to see them, and I shall be able to see the flapping flags and the performance of the sacrifice by the great sages. For these reasons, my dear husband, I'm very much anxious to go. Right, so yes, there's a shortish purport here. Yeah, so obviously it's well known that the tensions between Shiva and Daksha had been going on a long time. So Sati had not been to her father's for a long time. Yeah, so she was anxious to go, particularly because she knew her sisters and their husbands would be there. She's got a whole lot of sisters, of course, and other friends, and her mother and her mother's sisters. Oh, what a social gathering. And she really wants to go and interact with them. Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as is natural for a woman, she wanted to dress equally to her other sisters and also be accompanied by her husband. She did not, of course, want to go alone. Verse 11. This is interesting. It's actually Sati speaking very philosophically initially. This manifested cosmos is a wonderful creation of the interaction of the three material modes, or the external energy of the Supreme Lord. This truth is fully known to you, yet I am but a poor woman, and as you know, I'm not conversant with the truth. Therefore I wish to see my birthplace once more. Right, so again here we have a purport. It's not big, but it's substantial enough, actually, pretty big. So anyway, Sati knew that Lord Shiva's not interested in material life. So she addressed him as Aja, one who has transcended the bondage of birth and death. Aja, Ja being short for birth, and basically meaning Aja means like unborn, or one who's realized the self. So she told Lord Shiva that the illusions of material life, she is attracted, captivated by them, but she knows that he is not, because he's self-realized. And Prabhupada makes the point that only the less intelligent accept the perverted reflection of the spiritual sky as real. The actual reality is there, yeah. So this material world, of course, it's the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Elsewhere, Prabhupada has referred to the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which describes this material world as the reflection of the banyan tree on the lake. Looks just like the banyan tree. But up is down and down is up. What is considered the highest thing in material life, relationships with the opposite sex, it's the lowest thing in Krishna consciousness. And the highest thing in Krishna consciousness, the relationship between Srimati Radharani and Lord Krishna. Well, in the material world, it's low. So anyway, such people are attracted to their place of birth, their family, all these things. It's said that they're like asses or cows. She may have heard that. Sati may have heard that from Lord Shiva. But anyway, she was a woman, Yoshit, so she still hankered for material objects of affection. Prabhupada makes the point that Yoshit means one who is enjoyed. So the thing is, for spiritual advancement, association with Yoshit must be restricted. Because if you become a play doll in the hands of Yoshit, a woman, your spiritual advancement will stop. Yeah. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, those who are just like playthings in the hands of a woman, Yoshit Kridam Rigeshu, cannot make any advancement in spiritual realization. Okay, on to verse 12. O never born, O blue-throated one, not only my relatives, but also other women, dressed in nice clothes and decorated with ornaments, are going there with their husbands and friends. Just see how their flocks of white airplanes have made the sky, the entire sky, very beautiful. So again, there's a fairly substantial purport here. I mean, not big, but it's solid enough. So Prabhupada makes the point at the beginning of the purport that Shiva is addressed here as Abhava, which means one who's never born. Otherwise, generally, he's known as Bhava, one who is born. But this is how he's being addressed here. Abhava, not born. And this is not bhava, as in ecstasy. It's a short A, bhava and abhava. So, of course, Shiva, Prabhupada makes the point, he comes from between the eyes of Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma, who's known as Swayambhu, because he's not born of a human being or any sort of material creature, but is born directly from the lotus flower which grows from Vishnu's navel. So when Lord Shiva is addressed as Abhava, this can be taken to mean one who has never felt material miseries. So she wanted that Lord Shiva would understand that even those not related to her father were going, what to speak of her, who was intimately related to him. So Lord Shiva, there he is, she's really getting into it, sort of, I don't want to say bombarding him, but she's intense. She's trying politely but strongly to push him. So here Lord Shiva is addressed as blue-throated. When the demigods and demons were churning the milk ocean, poison came out and it would have poisoned the whole universe. But Lord Shiva took that stock of poison and drank it to save the universe. And he kept it, he held it in his throat. And because he held it in his throat, his throat turned blue. Therefore he's called Nilakanta, blue-throated. He could drink such a great amount of poison for others' benefit. And now, since his wife was personally requesting him to go to our father's house, even if he did not wish to give that permission, he should do so out of his great kindness. 13 and 14 have no purports. I'll just read straight through them. O best of the demigods, how can the body of a daughter remain undisturbed when she hears that some festive event is taking place in her father's house? Even though you may be considering that I've not been invited, there is no harm if one goes to the house of one's friend, husband, spiritual master or father without invitation. Verse 14. Please be kind towards me and fulfill my desire. You have accepted me as half of your body. Therefore, please show kindness towards me and accept my request. Okay, that's that section. That's Sati appealing to Lord Shiva to go. All right, devotees, so here we are. We've come to section 3, verse 15 to verse 25, which we've titled, Lord Shiva warns Sati not to go. So let us first of all read through the actual verses. First of all, 15. The great sage Maitreya said, Lord Shiva, the deliverer of the hill Kailash, having thus been addressed by his dear wife, replied smilingly, although at the same time he remembered the malicious, heart-piercing speeches delivered by Daksha before the guardians of the universal affairs. 16. The great Lord replied, My dear beautiful wife, you have said that one may go to a friend's house without being invited, and this is true, provided such a friend does not find fault with the guest because of bodily identification, and thereby become angry towards him. 17. Although the 6 qualities, education, austerity, wealth, beauty, youth, and heritage, are for the highly elevated, one who is proud of possessing them becomes blind, and thus he loses his good sense and cannot appreciate the glories of great personalities. Verse 18. One should not go to anyone's house, even on the consideration of his being a relative or a friend, when the man is disturbed in his mind and looks upon the guest with raised eyebrows and angry eyes. Verse 19, Lord Shiva continued, if one is hurt by the arrows of an enemy, one is not as aggrieved as when cut by the unkind words of a relative, for such grief continues to rend one's heart day and night. Verse 20, my dear white-complexioned wife, it is clear that of the many daughters of Daksha, you are the pet. Yet you will not be honored at his house because of your being my wife. Rather, you'll be sorry that you are connected with me. Verse 21, one who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed, both mentally and sensually, cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 22. My dear young wife, certainly friends and relatives offer mutual greetings by standing up, welcoming one another, and offering obeisances. But those who are elevated to the transcendental platform, being intelligent, offer such respects to the supersoul who is sitting within the body, not to the person who identifies with the body. Verse 23. I'm always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness, in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. Verse 24. Therefore, you should not see your father, although he is the giver of your body, because he and his followers are envious of me. Because of his envy, O most worshipful one, he has insulted me with cruel words, although I am innocent. Verse 25. If, in spite of this instruction, you decide to go, neglecting my words, the future will not be good for you. You are most respectable, and when you're insulted by your relatives, this insult will immediately be equal to death. Okay, so let's read through verses and purports. 15. The great sage Maitreya said, Lord Shiva, the deliverer of the hill Kailash, having thus been addressed by his dear wife, replied smilingly, although at the same time he remembered the malicious, heart-piercing speeches delivered by Daksha before the gardens of the universal affairs. Prabhupada points out that when Lord Shiva heard from Sati about Daksha, it brought back memories of those strong words against him. Psychological effect, Prabhupada says. And remembering those words, he felt sorry. He felt unhappy. Although in front of his wife he smiled. Shiva's Atmarana, self-satisfied. So why did he become unhappy? Because of the words of Daksha. Prabhupada refers to Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, who says that Shiva is completely in self-realization. But because he's an incarnation of Tamagun, he is then sometimes affected by pleasure and pain of this world. So Prabhupada makes an important point that there are differences between the pleasures and pains of this world and the pleasures and pains of the spiritual world. The main difference is that in the spiritual world, the effect of either pleasure or pain or some mixture of the two, it's qualitatively absolute. So therefore, if in the spiritual world one feels sorry, disturbed, distressed like that, it's just full of bliss. And Prabhupada gives a very nice example, very important example from the Damodar Leela, that Mother Yashoda chased Krishna. She chased him to catch him, and she caught him. But she chastised him verbally Yeah. So chastisement. But Krishna was ecstatic. And in his relationships with the gopis, sometimes he caused distress to the gopis, but actually they felt transcendental bliss. That's the difference between the material and spiritual worlds. So the spiritual world, Prabhupada makes the point, is reflected here. It's reflected pervertedly in the material world. Of course, everything in the spiritual world is absolute. And the thing is, in the spiritual varieties of apparent pleasure and pain there's no perception other than eternal bliss. But in the material world, because everyone is feeling the impacts, the influences of the modes of material nature, that people are feeling sometimes pleasure, sometimes pain, back and forth like that. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore, because Lord Shiva, although a fully self-realized person, was in charge of the material mode of ignorance. Yeah, we just read again. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore, because Lord Shiva, although a fully self-realized person, was in charge of the material mode of ignorance, therefore he felt sorrow. Okay, verse 16. The great Lord replied, my dear beautiful wife, you have said that one may go to a friend's house with being invited, and this is true, provided such a friend does not find fault with the guest because of bodily identification, and thereby become angry towards him. Right, so here's Lord Shiva looking into the future. Of course he has mystical powers, but in this case it's not really so much mystical powers like, oh, I can see you're going to become very distressed by this whole situation if you go to your father's house. But rather, he just understood that this is what's going to happen, because Daksha is Daksha. So he just could understand. Surely Daksha's going to be angry with Sati mercilessly, despite her complete innocence. What has she done? Nothing. So if Daksha becomes angry with her and for her connection to Lord Shiva, Prabhupada says mercilessly, despite her innocence, this would be intolerable for her, so better not to go. Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this fact was already experienced by Lord Shiva, because although Lord Shiva was faultless, Daksha had cursed him in so many harsh words. Verse 17, although the 6 qualities, education, austerity, wealth, beauty, youth, and heritage, are for the highly elevated, one who is proud of possessing them becomes blind, and thus he loses his good sense and cannot appreciate the glories of great personalities. So Prabhupada makes the point that it can be argued how Daksha could be so unnecessarily. Well, it can be argued that since Daksha was very learned, wealthy, and austere, and it came down in a very exalted heritage, how could he become unnecessarily angry. So the answer is that when those things are misplaced, those qualifications, being learned, wealthy, austere, coming from good family, when they're misplaced in a proud person, they produce bad results. Prabhupada gives the example, milk is very good food, but when it's taken by an envious serpent, it becomes poisonous. Similarly, material assets, like education, wealth, beauty, good parentage, they're all nice, but when they decorate malicious persons, they act adversely. Chanakya. So Chanakya gives the example of a serpent with a jewel on his head. He's still fearful because of being a serpent. You cannot say that, oh, well, no, it's okay because he's got a jewel in his head now. Yes, so serpents by nature are envious of everyone, even though others may be faultless. When they bite, it's not because the other creature or person or whoever is at fault. It's just their habit for snakes to bite innocent creatures. So similarly, although Daksha was qualified in many ways, because he was proud of his possessions and because he was envious, his qualities were all polluted. So therefore, sometimes it's detrimental for a devotee to possess such material assets. Queen Kunti addressed Krishna as a Kinchana Gochara, he who's easily approached by those who are bereft of all material acquisitions. And therefore you can say that material exhaustion, having just sort of had enough of material life, being just sort of fried, being fried with the material world, it's an advantage for advancing in Krishna consciousness. But if you are conscious of your relationship with Krishna, then you can use your material assets, such as learning, beauty, and ancestry, for the service of the Lord. Then they become glorious. In other words, unless you're Krishna conscious, all your possessions are zero. But when the zero is by the Supreme One, it immediately becomes 10. So, unless there's the Supreme One, zero is always zero. You can add 100 zeros and it's still zero. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, unless one's material assets are used in Krishna consciousness, they may play havoc and degrade the possessor. This is what's happened with Daksha. Verse 18. One should not go to anyone's house, even on the consideration of his being a relative or friend, when the man is disturbed in his mind and looks upon the guest with raised eyebrows and angry eyes. So there's a sort of short to medium purport here. Prabhupada makes the point that no matter how low a person may be, he's never unkind to his children. The tiger is always kind The tiger is always kind to her cubs. This is practically always the case in the animal kingdom. Come in between some wild animal and their children in the wild, boy, you can be in big trouble. So, but anyway, since Sati was Daksha's daughter, however cruel or contaminated he was, it was expected that he would receive her nicely. He's a father. So here the word anavastita indicates such a person cannot be trusted. And Prabhupada makes the point sort of just as a sort of a contrast with the point we made at the first, that animals are always kind to their children and low people are kind to their children. Prabhupada makes the point that tigers, generally, they're very kind to their cubs, but sometimes they eat them. So malicious people shouldn't be trusted because they're always unsteady. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thus Sati was advised not to go to her father's house, because to accept such a father as a relative and to go to his house without being properly invited was not suitable. Verse 19, Lord Shiva continued, if one is hurt by the arrows of an enemy, one is not as aggrieved as when cut by the unkind words of a relative. For such grief continues to rend one's heart day and night. Prabhupada makes the point Sati might conclude that she could take the risk of going. And if the father Daksha spoke unkindly to her, she'd tolerate, as a son sometimes tolerates reproaches of the parents. But Lord Shiva here is looking more deeply at that type of situation where you may go and see your relatives and they make some criticisms of you, but you try and tolerate them. You don't expect relatives to hurt you, but you expect enemies to hurt you, and therefore it's not so bad. And of course we must note that Lord Shiva has noted that it's going to be, if your father expresses himself as I expect he will, you're not going to be able to tolerate. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, when one is hurt by the strong words of a relative, one suffers the effects continually day and night, and sometimes the injury becomes so intolerable that one commits suicide. Verse 20, my dear white-complexioned wife, it is clear that of the many daughters of Daksha you are the pet, yet you will not be honored at his house because of your being my wife. Rather, you'll be sorry that you're connected with me. So he knows that she'll not be received well, and there's every chance of catastrophe, some real disaster. So he's indirectly asking her not to go. He's not just ordering her, no, you can't go. Verse 21, one who's conducted by false ego and thus always distressed both mentally and sensually cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here, the real reason for the enmity is pointed out. It's that Daksha is envious of Lord Shiva because Lord Shiva has a higher position than Daksha. He's a guna avatar, a form of the Lord. And therefore, at plus, he's in contact with the super soul as a pure devotee. And therefore he's honored more than Daksha. And this is intolerable for Daksha. So there are other reasons. There are other reasons also. He couldn't tolerate Shiva's high position, couldn't tolerate Shiva not standing up for him. But this was just a final manifestation of his envy. Lord Shiva's always meditating, perceiving the super soul. So the position of such a person is very great. It can't be imitated, especially by ordinary persons. So when Daksha came in, initially in the previous sacrifice, Lord Shiva was in meditation and might not have seen him. But still Daksha took the opportunity to curse him, because for a long time Daksha has been envious. The self-realized. See every individual body as a temple of the Lord, because the super soul's in every body. So, right, there's a second paragraph here to the purport. It's a substantial purport. So, the thing is, when one offers respects to a body, it's actually not to the body, but to the presence of the Lord within the body. So therefore, one who's always meditating on him is always offering him obeisances. But because Daksha was not advanced, he thought obeisances were for the body. And because Shiva didn't offer obeisances to his body, to Daksha's body, therefore Daksha became envious. So just see his not very profound understanding, Daksha. So such people who can't come to the level of self-realization of people like Lord Shiva, they're always envious. And the example is given here. So the demons are always envious of the Lord. They want to kill him. In this age, many scholars are envious of the Lord and want to kill him. Write him out of existence. So when the Lord says we should think of him and become his devotee, etc., manmana bhava mad bhakto, then they say, the so-called scholars say, that it's not to the person Krishna we must surrender. That's envy. So the asuras, the atheists without reason, they're envious of the Lord. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, similarly, instead of offering respect to self-realized persons, foolish men who cannot approach the higher standard of self-realization are always envious, although there's no reason. Verse 22. My dear young wife, certainly friends and relatives offer mutual greetings by standing up, welcoming one another and offering obeisances. But those who are elevated to the transcendental platform, being intelligent, offer such respects to the super soul who's sitting within the body, not to the person who identifies with the body. So Prabhupada makes the point that it could be argued, someone could try to argue that since Daksha is the father-in-law of Lord Shiva, then Lord Shiva is duty-bound to offer him obeisances, to offer him respect. But Prabhupada says in answer to that argument, it's explained here that when a learned person offers respects in welcome to someone, he's actually offering respects to the super soul. in everyone's heart and in the heart of that person who he seems to be offering respects to. So therefore it's seen amongst Vaishnavas, sometimes at least, that even when a disciple offers obeisances to the Guru may also return the obeisances to the disciple, because they're both offering respect to the supersoul, not to the bodies. And Krishna, Prabhupada makes the point that Lord Krishna, the Lord says in Srimad Bhagavatam that offering respect to his devotee is more valuable than offering respect to him. Because devotees don't identify with the body. So if you offer respect to a devotee will immediately know you're offering respect to Lord Vishnu, not to me, and will not be disturbed. And it's also said, Prabhupada makes the point, that as a matter of etiquette, as soon as one sees a devotee, one must offer him respect, indicating the supersoul within. So all Vaishnavas, they see bodies as temples of the Lord. So here, since Lord Shiva had already offered respect to the supersoul in Krishna consciousness, offering respect to Daksha was already done and didn't need to be done again. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, there was no need to offer respect to his body, for that is not directed by any Vedic injunction. And we are now going to do verse 23. So this is Lord Shiva speaking and trying to discourage Sati from going, not successfully, unfortunately. So Lord Shiva says, I'm always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness, in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. Okay, so here now, devotees, we have a really major purport. I mean, pretty major, yeah, good few pages. Let's get into it. Living entity, Prabhupada says, constitutionally pure. The Vedic literatures, so many of them, they say that. But of course, conditioned souls have the tendency to identify with the body. That's due to misunderstanding. We're not our bodies. As soon as we're fully Krishna conscious, then we're in our pure original constitutional position. It's called Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness transcendental to all material qualities, it's under the internal potency. And in this state, the activities of material consciousness stop. Prabhupada gives an interesting example, famous example actually. When iron is put into fire, it becomes warm, and when it becomes hot, it acts like fire, not like iron. Similarly, when copper is surcharged by electricity, it does not act as copper, but it acts as electricity. So in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Brahmano hi pratishta, Mamcha yo vyabhicharina. Prabhupada quotes the verse actually. It confirms that one who does pure devotional service, fully engaged in devotional service, is immediately elevated to the position of pure Brahman. So this Shuddha Sattva mentioned in the first paragraph is the transcendental position, or the Vasudeva position. Or rather Vasudev, not Vasudev. Vasudev is Krishna, who comes from Vasudev with a short a. So Prabhupada does explain that Vasudev is the name of the person from whom Lord Krishna appears. So this verse is explaining that the pure state is called Vasudeva because in that pure state, Vasudev, the Lord, is revealed with no covering. And Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, interesting point, important point, to execute unadulterated devotional service, therefore, one must follow the rules and regulations of devotional service without desire to gain material profit by material activities or mental speculation. So on we go to the third paragraph, pure devotional service. So in pure devotional service, one simply serves the Lord as a matter of duty. No reason like in material terms, no material conditions. That's called Shuddha Sattva or Vasudev, because at that stage, in that state, the Lord is revealed in the heart. And Prabhupada makes the point that Srila Jiva Goswami has very nicely explained this Vasudev or Shuddha Sattva state in his Bhakti Sandarbha, Bhagavat Sandarbha. And there Prabhupada explained, Jiva Goswami explains that 108 Ashtatara Shata is added to the name of the spiritual master. Like we say, Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya. Ashtatara Shata Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yeah. So therefore this Ashtatara Shata 108 is added to the name of the spiritual master to indicate he's in the Shuddha Sattva stage or Vasudeva stage. So the word, Prabhupada goes on in the same paragraph, the word Vasudeva is also used for other purposes. It can also mean one who is everywhere, who's all-pervading. The sun is also called Vasudeva Shabditam. So this Vasudeva term can be used for different purposes. But whatever purpose we adopt, Vasudeva means the all-pervading Lord or localized Lord. And we see in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, it said that factual realization is to understand Vasudev, the long A, the Lord, and to surrender to him. And Vasudev, like Krishna's father, with the short A, Vasudev is the ground in which Vasudev, Krishna, with the long A, is revealed. So when you're free from contaminations of material nature, when you're in pure Krishna consciousness, in the Vasudeva state, Vasudev, the Lord, is revealed. I hope you're following all that, devotees. I mean, it's quite important and it's very interesting. So this state is also called Kaivalya, or pure consciousness. So when one's in pure transcendental knowledge, one is in Kaivalya. Right, so Vasudev, short A, Vasudev, also means Kaivalya. And this Kaivalya word is generally used by impersonalists. Liberation, But actually, Prabhupada makes the point, in Krishna consciousness, Kaivalya, Krishna conscious Kaivalya is higher than impersonal Kaivalya. So in that Krishna conscious state of Kaivalya, through hearing and chanting, remembering Krishna, by developing knowledge of the science of Krishna, one can understand him. And this is all under the guidance of the internal potency of the Lord. So there's more here, devotees, more purport. This is a major purport. So in the fourth paragraph, Prabhupada points out the action of the internal potency is described here as apavrita, free from covering. And because the Lord, his name, form, qualities, etc., are all transcendental, it's not possible to understand any of them with material senses. But when the senses are purified by devotional service, then you can understand, then you can see Krishna without covering. So a person might wonder that since a devotee has a material body, how is it possible for the same material eyes to become purified by devotional service? So Lord Chaitanya gives the example that devotional service cleanses the mirror of the mind, and in a clear mirror you can see the face nicely. So similarly, by cleansing the mirror of the mind, one can have a clear conception of the Lord. So Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verse 8 says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena, by doing our duties in devotional service, or simply by hearing and chanting about Krishna. If your mind's always engaged like this and doesn't go elsewhere, one can realize the Lord. So Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, as confirmed by Lord Chaitanya, by the Bhakti Yoga process beginning from hearing and chanting, one can cleanse the heart and mind, and thus one can clearly see the face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, devotees, so you know what? There's another paragraph, a fifth paragraph. This is certainly substantial purport. Lord Shiva says that since his heart is always filled with the conception of Vasudeva, the Supreme Lord, therefore, because of the Lord's presence in his heart, he's always offering obeisances unto him. In other words, he's always in samadhi. And this samadhi is not under the control of the devotee, it's under the control of the Lord. By his spiritual energy, the Lord reveals everything. So Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 6 talks of this, Sambhavam Yatma Maya. By the Lord's own sweet will he comes and he reveals himself by his internal potency when he's satisfied with the devotee's service. So, and the Lord never commands, never tries to command that Lord, you must come so I can see you, or you must come and dance for me. That's not the devotee at all. So, some people who are not devotees, they may try to command the Lord, but devotees will never do that, because the Lord is the Lord. We are not the Lord. The Lord is not subject to our command or anyone's command. It's just a matter, if he's satisfied with your devotional service, then he'll reveal himself. And therefore Prabhupada makes the point that an important word here in this verse is at Hoksaja, because it indicates that the activities of our material senses will fail to realize the Lord. You can't realize them by mental speculation, but if we subdue the senses and do devotional service, then the Lord will manifest and reveal himself. And when the Lord does that, the experience for the devotee is so amazing. The devotee feels he has no other duty than to offer obeisances. The absolute truth reveals himself to the devotee in his form, showing he's not formless. And when the Lord reveals himself like that, the devotee offers obeisances. We offer obeisances to persons, not something impersonal. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, prapadyate, one surrenders. One surrenders to a person, not to impersonal non-duality. Whenever there's a question of surrendering or offering obeisances, there must be an object of surrender or an object of obeisances. So, okay, devotees, carry on. We're going to conclude the chapter right now. Verse 24, Lord Shiva finally tells Sati, therefore, you should not see your father, although he is the giver of your body, because he and his followers are envious of me. Because of his envy, O most worshipful one, he has insulted me with cruel words, although I am innocent. So, okay, in the purport, Prabhupada begins by making an interesting point, that for a woman, both the husband and the father are equally worshipable. They protect her, father during her youth, husband during her maturity, so they're both worshipable. But then again, still it's possible to say that the father's position is special because he's the giver of the body. Husband isn't. Srila Prabhupada, doesn't exactly, he concludes the purport, but about half of the purport, Prabhupada says, Lord Shiva reminded Sati, your father is undoubtedly worshipable, even more than I am, but take care, for although he's the giver of your body, he may also be the taker of your body, because when you see your father, because of your association with me, he may insult you. And an insult from a relative is worse than death, especially when one is well situated. In verse 25, if in spite of this instruction you decide to go, neglecting my words, the future will not be good for you. You are most respectable, and when you're insulted by your relative, this insult will immediately be equal to death. And obviously it will lead to your death immediately. All right, now that's the end of chapter 3. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.